Welcome to video 13 in our van build series. Today we are going to build the floor in our van, and we're going to do something we haven't seen anyone try. We're not going to build the floor in the van, we're going to build the entire one-piece floor on a workbench in the garage. And then, if everything goes as planned and there are no surprises, we're going to install the entire floor in under 5 minutes. I hope this isn't a costly mistake. Here's what we're going to need. We're going to need a van rug cargo mat. We're going to need 3 sheets of 5/8 tongue and groove fir plywood, about 80 square feet of vinyl flooring, and 850 grams of base L margarine. I'm not kidding. Let's get started. Look at that. Oh my gosh. Oh, that is fantastic. Oh my gosh, that is good. Well, it just fits completely around the wheel wells. It doesn't look like I have to trim anything. Look at this fit. Oh my gosh. And to the feet, the floor's flat now because those ridges are going inside each pocket. So we're going to lay 5/8 inch tongue and groove on top of this, one solid piece, and then we're going to try something very different. We're going to apply the lino to the plywood before we install it. And with this large back door opening, theoretically, we can move the floor in one piece and just drop it down. No screws, nothing. And of course, right in here, our shower will be mounted on top of that with the drain going through. This is fantastic. So, I'll give you a link to this product. It is fantastic. So here we have 3 sheets of 5/8 tongue and groove fir plywood. I have moved all of our aircraft parts off of the assembly table, and my goal is to make the entire van floor right here at a comfortable working height. I started by screwing the first sheet of plywood to the workbench. These screw tooling holes will be filled later before the vinyl is installed. I used all of our remaining white glue, 3 different brands, to adhere the tongue and groove plywood to each other. I placed wax paper under the seams between the 5/8 fir plywood and the workbench. Working by myself, it was a little difficult to pinch the separate sheets of plywood tightly together. For this reason, I temporarily held one end tight with a few screws, while I moved the other half of the plywood into place. Again, these screw tooling holes will be filled prior to vinyl. With the plywood nicely seated within the tongue and groove seam, I used 2 ratchets to seriously tighten this joint. Then I screwed the second piece of plywood to the wood bench, just like the first piece, until the glue dried. This allowed me to remove the ratchet straps to start working on the second seam between the second and third sheet of plywood. Wiping off excess glue after compressing the joint. Here is just a repeat, applying the same procedure to the second joint. A day later, with the glue dry, I used the carpet as a template for the entire floor. Now, prior to tracing it, I wanted to ensure the carpet was not curled in any fashion. For this reason, I placed a number of weights on the carpet and let it sit flat for 2 days. Okay, this appears to be very straight, so that's easy. And behind the wheel well, it's not touching. There's a 1/16 of an inch there. So I will cut it a 1/16 of an inch shorter. All right, well this is good. So I know those edges there are completely straight. These ones here are straight, but they're a 1/16 of an inch narrower. So I'm going to start to trace this. Awesome. I want to take one more minute just to explain why I'm choosing not to go to the end of the plywood. First off, by going against a straight edge like this, I was able to verify what I was guessing earlier, and that is that front area is a little bit narrower. If I was just going against the plywood, I wouldn't know if you know, I wasn't putting it straight, or I wasn't pushing it up against straight, or anyway, by having these bars here, it was very clear that when I slid it into place that, you know, I'm against that far wall and I'm against this wall here, and I have it square. So by having a shoulder there, when I run the circular saw down there, I'll have some material on both sides to support the saw evenly. So I'm going to trace it right here. Looks like I need to run over here. My coffee's boiling over. And the water put out the flame. That's safe. Oh, coffee. I use two different saws to cut out the plywood, both a jigsaw as well as a circular saw. I'm about halfway done cutting at this point. These here, I guess you'd call them tooling holes. I've cut holes in those areas of the wood that are scrap to allow me to insert some clamps, and it's a really good way of securing a straight edge in the middle of a sheet of lumber. So I'll be running my circular saw against this. This, of course, is one of the bed rails that I disassembled the frame so I could have a good straight edge. This is a plunge cut. It's necessary when you're starting a straight cut in the middle of woodstock. Just a quick little observation that I want to share with you. I chose fir plywood. This is 5/8 of an inch tongue and groove fir plywood. A lot of people are recommending Baltic birch for the floor, and I'm sure that is the best that there is. I chose not to go with that because of the expense, but I did go to fir plywood over spruce. And I did this because, well, two reasons. It was available with respect to tongue and groove and the thickness I wanted. But I noticed that there were less voids, less gaps. Now, don't get me wrong, this is not as good as Baltic birch, which is fantastic, but very few gaps. Take a look at this here. It's pretty good. There are a couple. Let's take a look here. All right, down here. There's one right there, and there's another one just over there. But I'm quite impressed with this. So just a consideration for yourself when you're shopping for wood. Don't discard the fir plywood. It looks like it's a good product. Just looking at a close-up of this tongue and groove connection, and you can see it here. And the tongue goes all the way up to here because we're right on the cut here. But as you can see, we got a really good connection there. That's literally one piece of plywood now. With the new wood floor cut to size, time to see if it fits. Notice a couple of pieces of horizontal wood strips. These are temporary wood strips added just to stabilize the joints during transportation from the table to the van. So I'm about to do my first test fit, and I came in here and I noticed this little piece of plastic here. And that's pretty much overhanging the floor here. I think I'm going to pop the screws out to get that out. I can see that causing a bit of an issue, and also this one here is sticking out. Seeing as that plywood, you know, doesn't bend,
it's got to drop straight down. So I'm going to pop these two things out. Okay, I've also moved the seats all the way forward and tilted them forward. So if you look straight down, I have a clear path to the floor. Well, we'll see how this works. It was not uneventful, although I wasn't expecting it to be. But it's in. We did have to make one modification to one corner. I'm going to show that to you. And then, of course, when I'm finished, I'm going to take the final measurements of this to share it with other people. So I'll show you what we had to modify. So looking around the unit, as you can see, it fits exceptionally well. And the area that I had to modify, actually I'm going to take a couple close-ups of this. I'm going to trim a few things there. But this is the only area I had to modify right here. Obviously it's made to fit like this. And of course the carpet does fit like that perfectly. Problem with a piece of plywood is there's no bending. You have to get it down there. And directly above it you have all of this right here. So we did two things. I cut this back, just a small cut to make it possible to slide down. And I also disconnected this and sort of pulled it out of the way as we were dropping it in. So we're going to take it out and I'll start to prepare this workpiece for lino and also sand edges and maybe just trim it up a little bit. But these dimensions work. Hey everybody, I just got to share something with you. I'm in the process right now of turning my traced plywood into an AutoCAD drawing so I can share with others. So if anybody wants to build a solid floor and not purchase the carpet, I'm going to give you the exact dimensions. So I was working on these corners here and trying to figure out exactly what the radius is. And so I did the math and came up with it, and it's exactly 79 millimeters. So I looked across the room and I happened to come across this little base L margin. Look at this. I mean, it is exact. And so I measured this, and yes, guess what? The radius of a tub of base L margin is 79 millimeters. So as luck would have it, throw away your protractor and go shopping and get some margin, which you're going to use anyway, and you have your radiuses for doing your drawing.
If you're not planning on purchasing the cargo mat, but still like my idea of installing the floor as a single sheet of plywood, I'm going to save you a ton of work. I'm going to take a few minutes right now and share with you the exact dimensions to make your own floor without having a carpet to trace. Start by gluing 3 pieces of tongue and groove plywood together, exactly like what you just watched me do. From those 3 sheets of plywood, cut out a rectangle 300.5 centimeters by 179.8 centimeters. The first thing we're going to do is mark the lines for the wheel wells. They are 19.4 centimeters deep and positioned exactly as illustrated here. If you like, you can pause the video here and write down these dimensions. After you have the location of the wheel wells marked, draw in your 79 millimeter radius corners. Yes, go grab your tub of margarine and use that. Now cut out your wheel wells. After the wheel wells are done, we're going to focus on the 2 corners at the back of your van. Let's zoom in on them. Here we have another good opportunity to pause the video to do a screen capture. As you can see, this isn't a defined radius. So instead, I took measurements from my cut plywood in 1 centimeter increments. This very accurately captures the profile of this cut. Complete these measurements on both corners at the rear of your van and cut them out. We're now over half done. Moving to the front of the van, on the cargo floor, directly behind the 2 front seats, let's zoom in on the left corner. 3.8 centimeters from the edge of the plywood, mark the plywood as shown. Repeat on the front right side as well. Cut both of these pieces out. Now let's return to the left corner. Mark and cut this square as illustrated. With that piece removed, let's go back over to the far right corner and mark the plywood as illustrated using a radius of 4.8 centimeters. Cut this piece out and remove it. You are done. You now have a single solid piece of wood that will cover your entire 136-inch wheelbase Promaster floor. Now our van is a 2014 Promaster 2500 136 wheelbase. I am assuming that these dimensions will work for later model years, but I'll leave that for you to verify. This is what our floor looks like. We chose 5/8 of an inch tongue and groove fir plywood. I am told that Baltic birch is a better choice, however, we chose to use fir. This picture clearly shows our assembly plan. On the bottom is our bed rug. The part number is VRD P14M. It is a van rug cargo mat, which is 3/4 of an inch, closed cell foam, and the color that we chose is gray. We're using this product to provide some insulation, some sound deadening, and to even out the floor ridges. The middle layer is, of course, our plywood, and the top layer is our one-piece, no seams linoleum. There'll be no screws holding this in place, no holes in our floor to promote rust. We have already test fit it. Once it is in, it will not move. As our build continues, our cabinets will be screwed into the floor as well as the wall, and necessary plumbing will penetrate the floor as needed. All of these steps will enhance the integrity and security of our floor. Now that I know the floor fits, I sanded all of the edges. I also spent some time rounding the underside of the plywood, that area furthest from the sliding door. I did this as during installation, this is the pivot edge of the plywood, and by rounding the underside like this just slightly, it should aid in installation, and it shouldn't catch on anything. Notice how poorly the tongue and groove aligned the two pieces of wood? I have to fix this. Otherwise, the seam will be visible beneath the vinyl. In the end, I used both sanding and two different kinds of filler to even out the floor. I also sanded the entire floor, which gave me an opportunity to familiarize myself with every flaw and blemish in the wood. Oh my gosh, was this product a mistake. Don't buy this stuff. Don't buy this stuff unless you own a belt sander and have all kinds of time to waste. As you can see here, I'm just blindly working away as if everything is rosy.
Right now, I am not a fan of this. Rather than just testing a small area, I decided to, of course, do the whole thing. And it says right on here it's good for patching both wood floor and concrete. What I didn't realize is it's essentially concrete. So after you've put it on, trying to sand it smooth is almost impossible. But on a do-over, I wouldn't be using this. Perhaps I'd be using this in really deep holes, but I would just be going back to the very simple wood filler, and because of course this can be sanded. This cannot. We'll see how I feel half an hour from now. Well, it's 30 minutes later, and I'm not any happier. I've gone through two more sheets. This is the good expensive 60 grit. That's like completely smooth now. I'm maybe a third done. So this is an area that I've been working for several minutes on, and of course when I applied the patch, I was literally trying to just fill a small void. And of course that void is filled, but I also have this quite pronounced bulge of filler which I need to get rid of. I have gone through 4 different kinds of sandpaper and dozens of sheets, literally. It's not coming off. And I have to get this back to at least as good as when I started. Like here, actually, the light on the side here shows this up very well. That needs to be filled. I will not be using that material. Moving forward, I'm going to be using wood filler. Easy to sand, super easy to apply. No idea if it's the right thing to do, but I can deal with it. So to get this off, I am bringing out I don't have a belt sander, so I'm bringing out a drum sander for my drill. And I am going to work this right down to the plywood, and I'll probably go a little bit further by mistake. However, I'm going to get rid of this, and then when I do, I'll come back with a putty knife and bring it back to level using this. And then I will repeat for about 45 more times on the other patches on this wood. This is a horrible mistake, that material. Don't like it. Not good. Okay, I am like a week later. My gosh, I wish I was kidding. And this is done. I used this tool here to remove the floor patch. And of course, in doing so, I went well beyond the material and cut little grooves into the wood. So of course, I have filled that back with the plastic wood. And it is super smooth. So, my gosh, I created a lot of work for myself. But this is done. After approximately a week of sanding part-time.
Finally, time to install the vinyl floor. The adhesive that we are using is Robert's 3300 multi-purpose adhesive, and the $5 trowel has the correct ridge pattern to evenly distribute the adhesive for vinyl flooring. Linda went over the entire surface with a rolling pin to ensure the vinyl was firmly pushed into the adhesive. Here I'm installing a router roller bearing bit. My plan is to use the router to cut the vinyl even with the plywood edge. The router did a beautiful job. Finally, our floor is starting to look like a floor. With the floor almost finished, time to prepare the van. I started by locating and marking all holes within the floor, both manufactured holes as well as owner created. I then used a grinding stone to roughen up the area, remove any loose debris and rust. Then I mixed up some JB Weld epoxy to fill the holes. With the epoxy drying, I thought I would add a little bit of water protection just to the edge of the plywood floor located at the back 2 doors as well as the sliding door. Essentially those areas that could be exposed to moisture. You'll never see the plywood as matching stair nosing will be installed, but this will further protect it regardless.
Well, I have finished the inside of the van. I've washed and cleaned it completely, scrubbed it down, and added some trim-clad white rust paint wherever there is exposed metal. Yesterday's work on the epoxy, here's what it looks like today. It's essentially just a little raised bump, and of course sprayed over top, completely sealed. That stuff's rock hard. So this is done. I have completed applying a seal to the edge of the plywood at the door entry. So this is the back, and I've completed the same thing on this side. The sliding door is here. And I've done one more thing. If you look down here, I've added, there's just 4 screws attached right here. This is one of the seams right here. And what I've done is I've added just a chunk of 5/8 plywood, just a couple screws here, a couple screws on the other side of this seam. And the idea is to reinforce the integrity just for the purpose of transferring the floor into the van, and I'll remove it prior to putting the van floor down. You can see I've done another one right here. And this is the seam right there, a couple screws each side. Again, this will come off as soon as we put it in. It's just to make sure that we don't make any foolish mistakes as we move it into the van.
Well, we finally get to install our floor. This is definitely a two-person job. It's not difficult though, nor time-consuming. We just took our time paying special attention to the potentially weak spots, the seams. It takes two people working together to wiggle it around to get it to the correct position to lay it down. Here you can see we are removing the two reinforcement strips. To be honest, I don't think that we actually needed them. Our two seams are solid. There was no sign of any weakness. However, I felt more comfortable with the extra insurance. I would have just been sick if we had broken this floor in half during the install.
Linda, this is fantastic. Just absolutely fantastic.
All that is left is some stair nosing, both for the sliding door entrance as well as the back entrance. I cut the first one with a hacksaw and used a chop saw for the second. On both pieces, you need to pay special attention to the screw hole locations to ensure that they remain centered in your final piece. It may mean cutting a piece twice to keep those screw holes centered. This small attention to detail makes all the difference. The color that we chose was a complementary brass. It certainly works well with our tile pattern. Unbelievable how this finishes the project. It looks so professional. Well, we learned a lot on this build and shared with you all of our mistakes. I hope you find them helpful. Now let's go build a roof rack.